Guys, this is going to be in two parts, this visit from Yoav, just so you know. So this is part one, and part two will be out very soon. Talking to Yoav Haruvizepa, a Jew from Israel living here in Prague, a friend of mine. And I wanted to bring him on to talk about different topics related to Israel, holocaust, and so we spoke about that, the holocaust, the foundation of Israel, politics, what a kibbutz is, which is basically one of the fundamental parts of the idea behind settling in Israel. Told me a little bit about his personal journey into the military and his family issues and therapy and stuff like that. And then, the conflict, obviously, between Palestinians and Israel. And it's a complicated topic. And I have always felt that Yoav has had the ability to view things a bit from distance. He left Israel for a reason. And therefore, I think he gave kind of a balanced view on the situation. There is no right, there is no wrong. It's nobody can maybe say who threw the first stone. So it was an interesting talk, and I hope you will enjoy. As for the sponsors, that's Alfred Jobs, alfred.cz or Alfred Jobs in the app stores. Thousands of jobs in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, available in English, Slovak, and Czech, and you can set up a job also. You get sent a notification whenever there is a relevant job for you. And it's super convenient to use. You can use it while you're still sitting in that shitty other job that you have, and get told when there is a new opportunity. Your dream is coming along. And then the Old Bar Prague on Cypher Tower 21, not far from the main train station, and close to Rigrovisari Park, which is a great place. The park is great, and the Old Bar is even more great. Perfect for breakfast, lunch, or snacks. Available also on delivery, takeaway, and you can sit in. It's not a big place, but there are some seats. And oatmeals, skyr, healthy goodies, juices, coffee, and great service and friendly staff. And guys, check that out. That's you will thank me afterwards. And that's it, I think. Enjoy. Okay, welcome to the bunker, Yoav Haruvizepa.
Thank you.
Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You are, yes.
I'm not even going to ask you if this is a common name. Yoav is a common name, right?
Yoav is a common name. It is the name of King David's Lord of Military.
Are you related, or?
I am not.
And how does it work? Your last name, is that like... that's a family name.
My original last name is Haruvi. In Hebrew, it's pronounced Haruvi. The H and the R is different in Hebrew. And Zepa is my wife's last name. Haruvi is a Hebrew translation from a Polish last name, which was Boxer. That's my grandfather's old surname, and it means a kind of a carob tree. So Haruvi is like a
tree.
Carob, yeah.
But so now I actually asked you about if it was a common name that I wasn't going to do. But so is this normal in Hebrew or in Israel? Yeah, you're from Israel, Jewish from Israel. But is that normal that your name is taken after your wife's, or?
It is not. It's like a new age shit.
Okay.
With ideas to prove.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's a result of a bureaucratic mess. But it came out in a way that we are
happy with it.
Happy with.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And you live here in Prague, and we met through our dogs.
Yes.
as a lot of people that I know. One of the best things about getting a dog is that you actually end up getting a lot of friends. I guess it's kind of like having kids. You meet other parents and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I, after we met a few times and had conversations, I was more and more curious, and I always felt that we had conversations about topics that, to me, being from Iceland and not knowing a lot other than what I read in the press there, then I felt it could be interesting to bring someone like you, let's say a regular Yoav from Israel, with a Jewish background, being a Jew. There's a lot of topics and some of them very sensitive that I felt that I could discuss with you that are not necessarily something that people always feel comfortable talking about.
I guess I can say it's a defense mechanism that I developed, but honestly, one reason that makes it like more pleasant for me to make it this recording is that I almost don't really feel so much sensitive or sentimental about these heavy topics that you are referring to. So it allows me to have some kind of a more of a pragmatic perspective to them. So I hope we can, bring it, discuss it from many angles. So it's a combination of my point of view and kind of a doubtful.
You never run out of answers. I've realized that in our conversation. You always have a lot of different angles. But just maybe one question. Is it difficult to be a Jew?
I don't feel any difficulty about it. Oh, well, I think my instinct was to say, to respond to this question from the perspective of a Jewish versus the world. While in second thought, the difficulty about being Jewish is to have that kind of destiny to be a part of the Israeli nation with all of the meanings of that. So I kind of experience difficulty in being Jewish. For example, in the fact that I'm not neglecting, but denying my ethnic and religious personality. I'm trying to avoid it. Another new age shit. But so I'm kind of taught or told that I should be proud to feel part of my, nation or people and the legacy. And all that I'm feeling is that I'm a bit ashamed of it.
But is that because you obviously being Jewish is not the same as being from Israel?
I always make that definition. You often ask yourself as an Israeli, are you more Jewish or are you more Israeli? I'm always more Israeli for sure. And the things that I mostly like about the Israeli culture, the Israeli food, the Israeli language, the Israeli music, the Israeli, let's say the atmosphere or character that is in many ways for good and a lot for bad, but it's something that I'm connecting and related to. But these are not religion issues. I can appreciate
more cultural issues.
Yes. I can appreciate religion a lot. There are many things in any religion, and specifically in Judaism, that I can relate to on a philosophical and even, let's say, educational way. But I very much, with the lack of other word, probably because I can't find it in English, I have some hate towards the religiousness, because it symbolizes many bad and ugly things that I think it's big part of the reason for. So I'm kind of denied enjoying the good parts about it.
The bad part is winning.
I'm not sure I understand the context of
No, what you mean? I mean the negative drawbacks of the religious part are overshadowing maybe the positive parts of.
Oh yeah, exactly.
But I mean, like, as I said, I mean, like, I wanted to have you here because there is a lot of stuff that like, you know, I think people are often uncomfortable talking about. And I remember, for example, when I used to work a lot in Germany, and I worked with a lot of German colleagues, and I made the mistake of talking about the Second World War or asking about it because just out of curiosity. I mean, it's something that we studied in school. It's such a big part of last century and kind of the, let's say, the modern life of today in Europe is very much shaped by this event. And I felt that it was the wrong country and the wrong people to talk to it about because they just went backwards and they didn't really want to discuss it, which I felt a little bit weird because, I couldn't really feel that they didn't do anything, you know. But it's a part of their history that they're ashamed for. But it goes further than that. I mean, if we talk about persecution of Jews from a historical point of view, it's an old thing, right?
It's the Hebrew speakers refer to it as 2,000 years of exile. Historically, I'm not sure if during all that time the Jewish people were in fact persecuted, but it's a narrative in Israel that the Jewish people are so strong, and that relates to be like to what I said about being part of it and be proud of it, is what kept the Jewish people, allowed them to survive for so many years, despite being persecuted many times over. The Spanish Inquisition or something had to do with it, and probably additional examples in the past. But it all led, let's say, right before the Holocaust. It led to a Zionist Congress at the end of the 19th century, where the most known person out of that event was Benjamin, Ze'ev, Theodore, some more names, Herzl, which is originally a Hungarian guy with a long beard, let's say, invented the idea of a country for Jewish people so that they will no longer be persecuted in countries where they are a minority.
But why? And because I mean that seems to have been like let's say the story is that the Jews are in some cases a minority and actually were forced into somehow taking over responsibilities like financials, tax collection, a lot of things, because it was considered dirty work at that time, or it wasn't good job. So let's give it to those people because they're marginalized anyway. And it then backfires because then over time these become unpopular. They become clever at it. They become good at it. They become rich.
They are considered the people that stole the money and the jobs, I believe, from the local, original Germans. And moreover, they were mostly Orthodox religious. So they lived in a enclosed community, and they also appear different. They practiced a different religion, so they were easy to point at as scapegoats for the results. I mean, the consequences in Germany after the First World War. So Germany was weakened, and the Jewish people were blamed for it more and more once Adolf Hitler came to power.
Yeah, because they were easy scapegoats, I guess, because you have a group of people that keeps by itself, has money, and you're looking for someone to blame.
And all other people are very poor and jobless. And so it's definitely an easy target.
But if with this, because I read somewhere, I read a book about DNA development and how there is, and in that book, I mean, yeah, it was just one book, but it was someone who obviously knew something about what he was writing. But he claimed that because you have two types of Jews, you have the Ashkenazi, and then you have these what's it called?
Sephardic.
Yeah, Sephardic, and the Sephardic are more kind of Northern Africa, right?
Correct.
And the Ashkenazi is more European, Eastern European.
Yes.
And this book claimed that over centuries, the Ashkenazi Jews had acquired genetically superior skills in mathematics and finance and things like this. Is this something that you hear in Israel?
It's not really something that I hear. It's not part of the
narrative.
Ashkenazi versus Sephardic, conflict. There is a lot of conflict, but I don't think that these specific things or characteristics that you mentioned are really part of it. It relates to the fact that Ashkenazi people in Israel are considered like the elitist facts that look downwards on Sephardic. One, because they consider themselves, and I'm Ashkenazi, and I myself, are you
a financial genius?
I am not, but I sin. You know, what is the verb for making a sin? Let's say, of being that kind of Ashkenazi elitist prick.
Yeah.
Yes. So it relates to it in that way, where Ashkenazi. I mean, that's one angle of it, and another is that Ashkenazi were the first immigrants to Israel in the beginning of the 20th century, and then the Sephardic came from Africa later on, and were basically controlled and managed by the Ashkenazi government and the Ashkenazi existing residents of Israel.
The Ashkenazi came mainly then, I guess, from Russia and Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, all those countries, right?
I think that Russian and Polish are probably the majority, but the other countries that you mentioned have a lot of representation in Israel. I can't really, say the exact periods of time that each of them came. I do know that Russian immigrants came at the beginning of the century, when the Bolsheviks were formed, the kibbutzim.
We're going to talk a little bit about that later, because that's a very interesting kind of, let's say, lifestyle form in a way, the kibbutz. I had no idea about that. I mean, yeah, I knew a similar form, but I didn't know that it was in Israel. But a little bit about the Sephardic. Were they being persecuted in Africa? Were they being pushed out there or marginalized?
Not that I know of. I assume that in later years there must have been conflicts between, Islamic and Jewish communities in northern African countries. I mainly refer to Morocco or
Algeria or
Yemen. Not only northern African are considered Sephardic. We Ashkenazi, being Ashkenazi, we see them. We have to learn to distinguish. I'm saying it kind of cynically, but
but it is very cynical.
Yes, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is that they came also from Iraq, and they came also from Iran.
Persia, yeah.
Yeah. So it's all, let's say, Arab cultured Jewish people. So they are not necessarily in Israel. They're called Easterns, Mizrachim, and I don't remember. It was brought up sometime recently where I saw that someone asked, why are they called Mizrachim, Easterns, if they come from Morocco, which is west of Israel. So I guess that each country had its own story of persecution. I know that today, for example, they just had some diplomacy occasion with Morocco, and they interviewed some Moroccan people on the news, and they asked them what they think about the Israeli and the Jewish, and they say they are brothers. It's their country as well. We really want them to come visit here. I don't know how much it represents
the majority,
but that's a voice that was heard.
Yeah, but I guess then the kind of the culminating point or the end point of Jewish persecution is then the Holocaust during the Second World War, which I mean I read books about this. I mean, obviously this is something you learn in school. I mean, and it's covered in pop culture, in movies and things like this. And I mean, it was just last week or 2 weeks ago that I read about this 100-year-old German prison guard that was being trialed now for his participation in being a prison guard in one of those camps. Now, I visited Auschwitz and I went to another camp here in the Czech Republic, Terezin. And the scenes are horrific. At the same time, also, I know that the same was being done earlier elsewhere. I mean, there were labor camps that then ended up being death camps because they worked the labor to death and obviously didn't prioritize the people that were in those camps for nutritious food or hygienic or anything. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they treated prisoners or labor prisoners worse, obviously, than they treated their own citizens and so on. It doesn't make it any less horrific, but it wasn't necessarily a new thing. How is this seen? I mean, I don't know, because you sometimes get the feeling that a big part of the world feels guilt about this. Do Israelis feel themselves, or Jewish people in Israel and elsewhere, do they feel that they're victims of this? Or is it just a convenient topic to bring up? I know this sounds really arrogant to say it like this, but yeah.
I actually think that it is a narrative that is well kept in Israel and maintained. I wouldn't be entirely cynical to say that all of, because a lot of commemoration is happening to keep remembering that narrative. And it's part of expressing the sorrow and moving that story onwards. But there is a big part of it that says we are the Jewish nation, the persecuted Jewish nation that were persecuted and were victims of that very horrific event. and this is what justifies our right to have our own country.
At whatever cost,
Meaning,
whatever conflict that comes with.
I think, there is probably a lot more to say about that conflict, but I think that it was never the plan to have that conflict. But no matter what, it would be said that that Jewish people would only be safe in their own Jewish nation. Otherwise, they could keep being persecuted. So, whatever are the consequences, it is a right of a Jewish person to have Israel as a protector. And I must say that with a lot of criticism that I have towards Israel, and even to its, let's say, the bureaucratic facilities, I can also say that it is something that I'm familiar with, that Israeli people take care of other Israeli people wherever in the world, for free. You know what I mean? Like they would reach out a hand.
There's a camaraderie, like people stick together.
Yes.
But how, because, the reason why I asked you this is that I have a feeling that, for example, we're going to talk about the conflict and the Palestine issue later, but I have a feeling that that the world struggles a little bit with how to deal with Israel. And I think it's very easy, or, it's like anything that I would say against, I don't know, if I would speak against Israeli foreign policy, then I'm anti-Semitic. Like that I'm somehow, you're almost either with them or against them. There is no, and that brings me to think, okay, so where is this guilt? What is it that, like, are we, obviously the Germans feel guilty. I guess you know that. Or uncomfortable with it.
You can refer to that question thinking about a German guy meets an Israeli guy in a bar, whether in Berlin or in Tel Aviv or anywhere else in the world.
Would Germans go to Tel Aviv?
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a warm relationship between today's Israel and today's Germany, both the governmentals, and the just
people, the regular people.
Israelis love going to Berlin. Berlin is today considered the second most, third, let's say, after United States. Maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, a lot of Israelis currently live in Berlin. I think that in Europe it's the most common destination for Israelis to go live in. Anyway, when they meet, then you can always think about the grandfather of that German guy and his possible interaction with the grandfather of that Israeli guy. And I guess that it's not that I can testify for so many examples, but I would imagine that a German guy would have some, let's say, doubt or fear to touch a soft point or to say things that might, insult. Where I think actually that he's the one that has more soft points about it, because we are very, rigid about it. Because we process it so much. Maybe I'm not the most common example. Maybe I'm more towards the apathetic side, but the ongoing processing of it brings us to deal with it as a much lighter topic. So
you can joke about it.
Oh, we joke. I mean, Holocaust jokes is like it's a category
In Israel.
in Israel. We use terms from the Holocaust to describe different characteristics. For example, you might call like a tough teacher or a tough military commander a Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
To describe, and you can say like like a cooperator, let's say in the military, when you have the guy that's from the class, but he needs to tell the class to stay in line, and they say, you're a capo or you're a Judenrat, because you're like the cooperator of the
hierarchy, the power people.
So it's definitely, but still at the same time, a lot of people would be very sensitive about it. Either if they have their own personal stories, if it's like, I mean, there are non-Ashkenazi Jewish people that experience that Holocaust theme and ceremonies and stories very, very personally, as if they were their own.
Which they weren't. Like the Sephardi, they were not involved in this.
No, not directly.
Not like in Europe.
Yeah. They weren't from Poland or so they didn't directly suffer from it.
But they have taken it as their own or adopted it.
No. It's part of the Ashkenazi Sephardic debate. Who owns the Holocaust and for what purposes? Mm-hmm. So I would only say that at this point, I think, because it might slide away from it. But I don't think that traditionally, the Ashkenazi own it as their own. Their families are the ones that suffered from it. I think that one very important thing to mention is that Holocaust had effect not only on the people that experienced it in first hand. So there were the ones that died and entire families were, and then there were the survivors, and so-called survivors, many people were able to make it something positive for themselves, as any other thing, or
any other thing that goes
the difference between different people is how they
some become stronger, some break.
Yes, but in many cases it's told about the second generation to the Holocaust, where it's really like it's like a phrase. I don't have it from the top of my head now, but to categorize those second generation sons and daughters of those survivors and how they were raised with a traumatic person. Today it's so common to go and get psychological treatment and talk about it. Today you talk about it as part of the law. I mean, you have to commemorate it. You have to discuss it. But then no one talked about. They even mocked them sometimes. They would say, "Oh yeah, that crazy lady from that apartment over there, because she had post-traumatic
stress."
And she yelled, and then her son was raised under
these conditions.
Yeah. So
it filters into the society through the trauma that the survivors brought with them.
Yes, and I assume that it has. I mean, let's say in my personal story, although my family didn't have direct impact from the Holocaust, it did, but in farther, connections from me. So I just want to say that my mom's mother was abusive. And so my mom was very soft-handing towards her children. And then it kind of balances, and it impacts our generation as well. So although it's not related to the Holocaust, I just want to say that this kind of, balance and,
these are forces. These
back
are
from
different forces that are at play. So she is abusive. Your mom becomes soft, and then you are probably going to be different to your son or your children. But a little bit about the because you say that you have processed this event in, let's say, in your nation or in your nation's consciousness or whatever we can call it. But so you can joke about it, but I could not come there and joke about it, I guess.
I would enjoy if you joke about it.
Yeah, you would, but I mean from
I guess
I don't have any jokes about it, by the way. I don't know anyone, any great ones, but because you have a feeling that with, for example, with blacks or African Americans, that they can say certain things and joke about certain things and use certain words that we cannot.
But that occasion is represented in movies, so I'm very aware of it. But I can't, bring from my memory any. Well, I can imagine someone not Jewish says, a joke about the Holocaust, and a Jewish person gets offended by it. So yes, I guess my answer to that is that let's say it equates with the black
community or so you told me, I asked you this before about the personal story, and you said just now that it's not like directly linked to you, but there is some there were some connection, right?
Between me and the Holocaust,
yeah.
you mean?
There were some relatives. I think you told me about a tattoo or something.
I think that the tattoo story you mentioned is about the numbers.
Yeah.
That survivors or non-survivors as well had on their hands as part of being in a camp. In camps. I would say, by the way, if you ask about my relationship, my relation to it is that if you knew someone from your family that had a number on his hand, that might be the definition if you do or you don't have a connection. So I don't really have. Again, maybe only something that's a story that's not I'm not really familiar with.
Yeah.
But this number on this hand, I told you about it in the context of pictures of survivors in Israel that are looking through garbage bins.
Yeah. Now I remember. We were talking about how are the survivors of the Holocaust that are still there, still alive, how are they taken care of? And they are neglected, you say. But the Germany is still paying reparations, right?
Germany is paying reparations.
So there is money coming that is supposed to take care of the survivors.
Correct. And it's not going directly to the survivors. And one of the popular criticism about the Israeli government is that it's not taking good care of its of the Holocaust survivors. So from one hand, they are being brought up on this kind of imaginary throne, being so important, that the story and the narrative of Israel and the justification of this nation, and we must commemorate it and tell this story. There is a new type of event in Israel that became very popular. It's called in Hebrew Zikaron Basalon. It means memory in the living room. And so instead of like public ceremonies that still occur, but as an addition to them, you would you would have a meeting in someone's house, hosting a survivor to tell you their story. So then you have a chance to ask questions, and we even had one like that here in Prague on the first like a few months after we got here. They invited us to participate, and it was an interesting. I mean, we had those in Israel as well, but it was kind of a way for us to meet fellow Israelis in Prague.
But how was that like in school? I mean, is it? I guess you learn a lot about this in school. And do you get visitors when you were in school, did the visitor come and tell you, this is my story in the Holocaust?
Yes, we did have survivors coming to school to tell us about their personal story. We even saw a film that then was followed by a visit of the hero of that film. So he told about his survival, and then he came to tell about it personally. And like I said, I mean, it sounds very romantic. And it is, I mean, romantic and sad and awful, right? Let's not... but then it's kind of the narrative that you're brought up with.
Yeah, and it has such a, I mean, this whole story on this whole event has had such a shaping effect on the world, you know, after it. I mean, there is a new nation created out of it, and a lot of, I mean, and that has come with a lot of ups and downs, and it has impacted world politics. I mean, there's it impacted international, what's it called, like agreements, legislation, the United Nations. I mean, there are many things that this shaped somehow. But I just, before we leave the Holocaust, because that kind of, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the foundation of Israel, or how Israel got in, or got activated, let's say, after this. But
switched on.
Yeah, switched on, let's say. But have you visited those camps, like yourself, in Auschwitz and Terezin?
So you asked about school, and it's an annual occasion in schools that in the 11th grade, I believe, we are sent on a trip to visit Poland and several camps. I didn't attend that trip because I hated, like, everyone at school or something like that.
Yeah, it was not not about the camp. It was
I
more
didn't
about
feel
the company.
good, about going with
This group of people.
And I visited later on Sachsenhausen, I believe, in near Berlin.
And how did that feel?
Well, let's say this: it's not well enough embedded in me the way I felt. So I guess that kind of, says that it didn't have such a strong impact on me. It was an interesting experience, and interesting sights to see up close. But I guess that I'm maybe too busy with other things that prevent me from being attached or being...
and maybe if you were, I don't know, 70 years old or 60 years old, it would have been different.
I'm not sure if it's about the age. I think it's my personality.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So 6 million Jews lost their lives in World War II, or that's at least what they that's the. I mean, I guess nobody knows for sure if it was 6 or 6.5 or 5.5, but and as I said, it had a lot of consequences, and one of it is that Israel gets switched on. you know, Jewish people need the country to call their own, where they can feel safe and that they are not the marginalized group of people. How many Jewish people are in the world now?
In the world, I
17 million or something.
You probably know a better.
I think
number.
so. And in Israel,
9
Yeah.
9 million. I think is not Jewish. Is all
yeah,
Israel, and I think that non-Jewish is probably about 30%. So
it's 6-7 million in Jews in Israel. But so you said that the let's say the reasoning or the idea behind this was to give the Jewish people a country that they could call their own, instead of being a nation spread in multiple different countries where they were not feeling comfortable or being treated in the right way.
Yes, and
but there is a religious thing as well. I mean, this is not like a coincidence. I mean, there is a story between Jerusalem and Judaism, right?
I think that the first people that came to Israel, besides having the shared religion as the reason for them being there, although there were Jewish people in Israel
already,
which was not yet Israel at the time before Israel was founded.
What was it called before? What was the name of the
Palestina?
Mm-hmm.
I know that they used to call it Palestina. I is Aleph Yud, the letters of Eretz Israel, like the country of Israel. So it was then Palestina. Actually, in coins where you toss the coin and you have heads and tails. So in Israel, you say etz, which is tree, or pali. Pali is like the short for Palestine, because on that side of the coin, it had Palestine embedded on it. So at that time, it was under control of British, or let's say Turkish, then British authorities.
This is what year? 19th?
The beginning of the 20th century. So the people that lived there were mostly Arab tribes and Jewish immigrators, from mostly Soviet Union, I guess, maybe Russia at that time.
Soviet Union.
I'm not sure I have the timeline, but so they came and they formed this way of living called kibbutz. Kibbutz, the literal translation is gathering. So later on we will discuss the gathering of different. We already touched it about the Ashkenazi and Sephardic, but the gathering of exiles. Kibbutz galuyot is the Hebrew term for the gathering of exiles. So the kibbutz in the early years of the 20th century was also kind of tribes
of exiles
of Russian they weren't exiles at that point anymore. I mean,
but they exiled from Russia. I know. And
I don't know enough to tell you the reason why they came.
No, but the Russians hated them before the Germans started hating them. I mean, in Soviet Union, they were really...
I just don't know if the reason for them to get out of the Soviet Union or Russia was that. It could be that they went to conquer, a goal of settling in that on that land.
But I mean, and this has always been like your holy land, right? I mean, it's been that is not a new invention. I mean, that's
it's the beside. I mean, one justification of Israel is that it was to keep the Jewish people safe from persecution. But the other and even more prominent justification is the biblical justification, which says that when the Jewish people escaped Egypt
Mm.
with Joseph, that took them through the desert.
Or was that Joseph? No, there was some other guy, right?
Let's find out.
Yeah.
I might be. Let me think.
I'm checking here. No, wait. Wasn't it Moses?
Moses.
Yeah, it was Moses.
God damn it!
You're a fake Jew.
I got my. It's
Yeah, I need to see some credentials
it's something
here.
I would know, but then you have that second to bring up that name, and it has the same sound, Ose. So anyway, Moses, yes, he took the Jewish people through the desert 40 years, and they reached that part of the world where Israel, was first announced, I would say. Moses, by the way, wasn't allowed to get into that land when they just got there. That I know.
But then it evolves, because I mean it's like it's the 14th of May 1948. That's one day after your birthday.
Correct.
That they that's the foundation of Israel, kind of after the Second World War. So, but there are settlements before, but it's not like a formal country.
Correct.
Kibbutzim
and so on.
Yeah. So it's more of a and was that time, let's say from the start of the 20th century, 1900 until after the war, that was a peaceful settlement. I mean, there wasn't.
It was never a peaceful settlement. You mean before the foundation of Israel?
Yeah, before it formally becomes a country.
I think it was much less a conflict.
Because this area, I mean, if you look at from a historical point of view, you look at Lebanon, you look at then Palestine before, and Syria, Jordan. These countries have always been very, let's say, diverse in a way, that you have, Arabs, you have Jewish, you have Christians. It's always been a melting pot somehow.
That's exactly the well, it's I guess it's destined for the Jewish people. You know that originally there was an idea to found the Israeli nation in Uganda. That was Herzl's.
But then they found lions there, and
and it was too hot.
Yeah,
and they came from they had white skin, so they
would burn.
Yeah, and so that's the place. That's the biblical place. What can you do about it? That's where they believe they deserve to. That's where God said that Israel should be, that the Jewish people should have. But I mean, technically, we now have a very, or let's say, a part of what should have been Israel according to the, God order. I can't get over that Joseph thing,
Don't worry about it. Just have a beer and chill.
Oh no, I'm just.
Yeah, I'm sure that Joseph was a distant relative of Moses, and there was probably a Joseph in the group.
My adopting grandfather's name was Joseph, and he was a hero, by the way, in the story of the kibbutz, of where I come from. So.
But so people want to create the nation. The British were in control of the land, right? I mean, it had been a colony of Britain, right? So the land is actually given to Jews by British, right? Isn't that how?
It wasn't. What I know is that the tribes that lived there were allowed to have their lives without intervention by the British authorities at that point. And I believe that until some formal declaration was made, the the resistance of the Palestinians, the Arab settlers at that time, was much less aggressive. And it only when they declared the foundation, then they went into they started going into wars over and over again across many years until this day. At the beginning, it was wars against those countries that you mentioned that surrounded Israel in several different times in the first decades of Israel.
Yeah, but but there's a lot. There's a lot of conflicts, and I just wanted to get you a little bit on the kibbutz, because, as I said, the kibbutz is if I describe it, it seems to be like some sort of cooperation. I mean, in where money doesn't necessarily change hands. People are. It's like almost like a hippie commune, and there was some Swedish influence on this as well, right?
There was Scandinavian visitors in the form of volunteers that came in earlier, like 80s, 70s. They came to be. They had a place to stay, and they got all the services as all other members of the kibbutz, and in exchange they just had to contribute work as all others. So yes, the kibbutz was let's say hippie in the from the aspect of having a lot of green grass to lay on and to smoke also, and they aspired to have equality. But the kibbutz started, this type of kibbutz that I'm describing is something that I'm more familiar with from later years of the 20th century, but the kibbutz was formed as an ideal that was kind of, I wanted to address that part about the Israeli nation bound to religion. So I think that it happened on the contrary, that Jewish people from Eastern Europe, after they suffered the Holocaust, kind of had some doubt, in God, in religion, in where, that question of where was God? And that's from one angle, and then the kibbutz filled in as some kind of it didn't really fill in, because actually it was already there. The ideal of the kibbutz that started in the earlier years of the 20th century, when they came to follow that ideal of I think that Karl Marx was the father.
So it's something that you can connect it somehow to the Soviet idea of cooperation, sharing, equality, many families living together.
They had those origins, but I'm not sure if the ideal really served. It was more Zionist, I think.
Yeah, but there are similarities that you can see.
It was about the land. It was about working in the land and drying swamps, and they sacrificed their individuality
for the greater idea. For the greater good of the group.
Yes, and at the beginning they were traveler groups, and then they started to settle, to work their land, and they really had to give up their belongings, and even to the extent of giving up their children. It was
but for me, you're describing communism
or a cult.
Yeah,
but that was the beginning of the ideal of the kibbutz and settling in Israel, Judaism settling in Israel, and having an alternative for religion as something to follow and something to believe. And then with the foundation of Israel, they had to create a new culture. They had to, it was the Tower of Babel, people came from Poland and from, they were Polish speakers and Russian speakers and German speakers and many other languages. And the earlier leaders of Israel, before and after the foundation, had the cause of creating, they wrote stories and poems for children in Hebrew, even though the children didn't speak that language, so that they can start learning Hebrew from it and speak it at home. And they invented, food that's Israeli. And
so they created a culture and a language, the language was there, but they because they actually...
The language was not there. That's exactly the point.
No, but Hebrew, the language existed, let's say. But
Hebrew that we speak today is very different from the biblical Hebrew that existed before. Eliezer ben Yehuda was the renewer of the Hebrew language. He wrote, let's say, a dictionary, and then he had to implement that dictionary, immediately with the help of Bialik, a national author that wrote Hebrew content for people to start
because you need to unify them somehow around something. But let's go a little bit back to the kibbutz, because I don't feel we have been clear on it. So how does a kibbutz work? I mean, we don't need to talk about the old ones, but because you were born in one of those. So what's the difference of being in a kibbutz, or what makes a kibbutz a kibbutz?
So let's take it from the point of my existence, or at least my creators. So my dad lived in a different kibbutzim throughout his life, and was even elected like the secretary of one of and then my mom had joined him in the kibbutz when they got together, and it meant that she had to give up her monthly salary. It was the 80s, so no one really had a lot of belongings, but anyone that came from outside still had to sacrifice from themselves to the kibbutz. The children still slept in communal places.
So the kids didn't sleep with the parents?
No, that was I'm kind of in the stitch point between the traditional kibbutz and the modern kibbutz, although we're now postmodern kibbutz way after that. But so my sisters still slept in that communal place and I didn't. So it still was the transition between having the kids as part of the community and belong to everyone, to raise, really to educate. Like you would have limited time with your child during the day. During all other time, there was someone in charge of educating them for you, as a teacher and as a parent. And then it slowly softened. So then I was no longer sleeping in those
communal areas. And what more? I mean, like, what about is it farming? How is value created? How is food created?
So in our kibbutz there were two factories, one for fabric and one for plastic nets that were
owned by the kibbutz.
Those factories were owned by the kibbutz, let's say formally. I'm saying that because corruption went in part at some point. Hard to say when. I'll get to that. But those were the... and also we had fields of bananas and corn and squash. My dad was in the part of growing bananas. And I will tell you later on how that smashed into his face.
The banana business went bananas.
Yeah, and then there was another way. So my mom went to work in the regional school.
Outside of
salary
outside of the kibbutz.
Outside of the kibbutz, and had a salary that was relatively higher than, let's say, another person at the same status, age, and that had 2 shifts at the I don't know, the
office,
the laundry folding service, whatever. It's a lie, because the laundry folding service was shared in, between all. Like you would be summoned this day. You
were doing
come.
this, yeah.
So, and that was the remainder, like doing chores, going to the food room.
So wait, so your mom got a salary that she then paid to the kibbutz, right? And she
Yes.
could keep a little bit of the money herself.
She couldn't. Theoretically she couldn't. I think that many people in the it would have been. I mean, it's the smart thing to do, to keep some of it for yourself. But formally, officially, you would have to give your entire salary to the kibbutz, and the kibbutz would then give you and everyone else everything that you need to live properly. You would have 30 cars to serve the entire kibbutz. So when we wanted to go and get something from the shop in Haifa, the nearest city, we had to book like a car.
First car sharing in the world.
Yeah, exactly. With the app that we had then in the 90s.
It was a book somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But and how what about religion? Does religion play a part in the kibbutz?
So let's just to mention it for one more second, that the beginning of the kibbutz was an alternative for religion. So I think that the founders of the kibbutz, of the kibbutzim idea, probably abandoned their Judaism religion and replaced it with a different religion. So in terms of being Jewish religious, as I previously said, I went far away from it. A lot of it is affected by being raised in the kibbutz. I'm not sure if it's because it's like my parents' state of mind, or if it's, let's say that technically and practically I didn't encounter signs of Jewish traditional Judaism until I was in the 13th, 14th, 15th
year
grade class. Yeah.
So what age is that in Israel? Like
14?
So
I said 14th grade, but there isn't. There is like the 9th grade, which was when I was about 14.
Yeah,
that's what I.
And how is it? Like so we're talking about kind of a cultish in a way, but in the absence of religion. I mean, it's you believe in the greater good of the kibbutz. You're sacrificing yourself. Everyone is parenting everyone. Is it also free sex and free love?
So again, it depends what time you ask about it. Because, for example, it's not exactly free sex, but maybe it's even the exact opposite. But in the earlier years of the kibbutz, there was something called a primus. Primus is like a dish or a aluminum thing, I think, that has 3 legs, and it described that thing in the kibbutz where they didn't want you to have like the family institution, so a mom, a dad, and kids. So even for couples, they would put a primus together with them in their cabin or tent, and they had their part, like with the bed and whatever they needed. They didn't have a kitchen, they didn't have shower, they didn't have toilet at those very, very early years, right? Because they had everything
communal.
So they only went there to sleep. But another thing that you do in your bed is sex, and then you have that third person sleeping right across from you in your cabin, exactly for that purpose, to prevent,
prevent sex.
It's not to prevent sex, but it's to prevent. They did have sex because part of their ideal was to create more, to create a next generation.
Mm-hmm.
But it was done in a non-romantic or non-hippie or sensual or emotional
it was
way.
More a practical.
It was a technique, yeah. And then later on, when you describe, that romantic idea, then you, at that point, when I experienced it, it was then lost. I mean, no one. You would be much more cynical about it, which led you to kind of desert the ideals behind it and only be forced to do it. So like any idea that is new, as it was several decades earlier, it lost its charm. And then people kind of went to be just normal people living in that
setup,
way. That they're not really, devoted to. So then they kind of start feeling, well, maybe it's not really the best way for us to do it. So they start taking a bit from their salary before they give it to the kibbutz and so on.
But I mean, the idea sounds beautiful, but the reality can be, because like what you're describing here, and I read a little bit about this when you told me about this before, but it's like a fairy tale in a way, like this idea that everybody works together, everybody's equal, everybody has enough, everybody is responsible, and the responsibility is shared, and we are kind of deactivating greed and personal preferences, and yeah, it sounds a lot like communism, and but in reality it's different, because I know that you had a hard time there, because you would, based on this what I just said, you would think, and all the animals in the jungle were friends, but they weren't.
We can examine the idea philosophically. We kind of need to dive deeper to check if it's something that can be applied on human nature. Probably it can't. I mean, it was there are much fewer active kibbutzim today in Israel than there were. Mine is not for the past 30 years almost, or let's say 25. That it broke apart because the idea didn't work, and it led to a lot of financial problems.
But what about daily life there? I mean, did you like it there, or was it nice?
I will start by saying that at some point I fled away from there. And my perspective of it was, being, I don't want to say forced, because it's kind of, the way for every person, that they have their neighbors and their classmates, and these are their friends. So the people in my kibbutz were my friends, and it happened at some point that these friends excommunicated me.
Which I don't even know what that means.
It means that they bullied me in an active way, which means at that age when it happened, I used to put gel in my hair to make it spiky. And then the leader of the bullying group, he sent his troops to smash my spikes. So that's actively bullying. And then non-actively just means that they don't talk to me and don't invite me to spend time with them.
Why was that? What did you do wrong? Other than gel in your hair?
That specific guy that I mentioned, we kind of had a micro Ashkenazi versus Sephardic conflict between us, which was based on my being arrogant, about intelligence, and he had strength in his arms, and that was kind of, it escalated, I would say, to the point that my mom was a teacher, like I said, so I kind of took advantage of that fact to help me avoid his bullying in school, and that caused him to make a silent war at me. I mean, maybe I'm mixing things up, but I remember that at the time when it stopped being personal and I had to use stronger powers to make him leave me alone physically, so then he went back and kind of formed this group of people from my kibbutz that
excluded you, basically.
Yep, and that was the way it evolved.
And how was it then to deal with this? I mean, because it's a community that is all about the community. It's all about that's the ideology.
And part of being in a community is also being alone and secluded, and find yourself, your own place as kind of the victim of that community idea. Today, as many other things that we mentioned, I look at it in a very apathetic way and processed way. It was, let's say, discussed many times along my over my life, and especially like in a psychology therapy. So
you in the end you got some help with this, or you went to a therapist?
I got some help generally, and that was part of it. It wasn't I didn't go there to seek help with that specifically, but I would say that this help eventually led me to go back into this group of people that are today my friends.
So they took you back?
Most of them. Yes. At the time when I experienced that bullying, I had one or two more friends that still kept in touch with me, and we kind of had our group, and one of them was then also excluded or excommunicated similarly to me for other reasons. And he also, so we had like our trio, and that was fine.
It sounds like the storyline of Revenge of the Nerds or some movie like that.
Yeah. And but it was okay, and it made me who I am. So I look at it this way: I don't have the pain of the wounds.
But isn't this? I mean, like, because I mean, of course, kids can be kids, and I bullied kids, and I was bullied, and yeah. But in this case, you live in a kibbutz, which the philosophy is about sharing. It's about togetherness. It's about sacrificing your personal, let's say, urges for the greater good of the community. Is it allowed to bully in the kibbutz?
It seems so.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, yeah. I don't think that anyone really was able to pay attention or really notice it. It was kind of, I mean, although it's a place with a few hundred people, each was in their own business, I guess. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, if it's allowed, it's not in any rules.
No, rule book. No, I'm just, it just contradicts a little bit the whole ideology. You know what I mean? That
because I think that ideologies are meant to be contradicted by the people who practice them, especially after time goes by and you kind of forget about the ideology and sort of just live your life, and that what proves if an ideology is really sustainable and justified
or not.
If people stick to it, and they didn't. So yeah.
But how was it there? I mean, you get all the regular education, everything is normal in that sense. I mean,
we went to schools that are mostly occupied by people from other kibbutzim in the area, and then later on with other moshavim, which is like it's a hybrid. It's a larger place. I mean, it was my first encounter with religious people or people that practice religious traditions. They had more mixture in origins, or let's say how to say backgrounds.
Yeah, because I mean, you come from a kind of a homogenic environment, I guess, in the kibbutz. So
mostly Ashkenazi. Today, much less. Much less. Because
but at that time, I mean, you're meeting people from other backgrounds for the first time, I guess, when you leave the kibbutz school.
Yes,
and how was that then? I mean, did you feel a big difference?
I'm trying to figure out if I felt a big difference because I was taught to notice that difference, because I mean, I came from a place where you would mock anything that's different from you.
That's human nature. Yeah.
Well, we did it. We practiced it very enthusiastically. So then, when I saw someone who has like this different kind of posture, more like manly,
muscular,
with the brace, like
gold chains,
and they maybe had like the kippah, the yarmulke on their head, and maybe they did things that I wasn't familiar with. So my first response to it was to mock it, or to be kind of distant from it.
But that's what we do. Anything that is alien to us is
so
either funny or threatening, or
Yeah. So you see that it's not really something that is what you're taught as part of being a kibbutz member, but it's just the consequences of being in that place where you mostly experience people that are the same as you, so you don't really have a lot of chance to. So you experience that kind of in a one wave instead of gradual, encounters. So today I have a chance to meet many different. At that time, we didn't really have cars, so we didn't get to drive a lot.
Yeah. So you were bound to the kibbutz. And how is the kibbutz scene in Israel? Like how is that? Like are these considered to be?
So it started in the early years of Israel as a very praised
lifestyle.
Maybe not the lifestyle, but the how to say, the institute was considered something that serves the Israel purpose of fighting for its land and developing its land and settling on the boundaries of Israel. And so then the Israeli soldier, the Israeli soldier, yes, of course, very much. I want to say that the guys from the kibbutz were considered, they always went to serve as combat soldiers, and they had like the nice, the hair. Sorry.
Not just
the Ashkenazi blonde, light colored hair, flowing around in the wind.
Not gelling it with and
exactly, and the spikes.
Yeah,
exactly.
The spikes. So this was the working class heroes. They produced the salt. This is the salt of the earth.
Working class heroes that that you mentioned, I kind of imagine, the city people that work in the. Yeah, but
No. That's a new thing. That's a new thing that we think that people are city. In the old days or back in the days, we thought that someone who actually worked with his body was the salt of the earth.
The salt of the earth is exactly the term that was used to describe the kibbutz. And then along with being corrupted and falling apart, it also turned to be an institution that would be criticized and judged for taking over the money, the fund, the Israeli nation fund and lands, because in the kibbutz you would live in a one level house with a backyard and a lot of
area. Yeah.
While in the city they had to live in
7 floors and small apartments, and
so it's been accused for taking over.
You're taking too much space.
Yes, and I guess that they kind of forget about why the origins and why the people from the kibbutzim got those rights in the first place.
So now you came to the end of part 1, and in part 2 we talk about Yoav's military duty and what happens, which is a mandatory thing in Israel, and what happens after that finishes. He went to the US, started a few businesses, or tried to start a few businesses, or participated in that. Then went back to Israel, met his nowadays wife, and he told me why they wanted to leave Israel. And what he thinks about modern day Israel, his issues with that, the conflict, and the territorial issues, and if the situation will ever resolve, and how it could be resolved, and how history will judge the whole thing.